ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of Infection Podcast. My name is Nick Craig. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig. You can check out my website, nickcraig.com, or our website, infectionpodcast.com. Joining me, as always, my partner in crime, Brian with an I, Aldridge. What's going on, Brian?
Hey, not too much. If you want to find me, of course, you can get me at Boise Computer on X as well, or at Brian Aldridge on whatever else is still up on the other social media platforms. Except for Mastodon. I'm not on Mastodon. Isn't that what it's called, Mastodon?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man.
Or Threads.
I'm on a couple of Mastodon instances, and I very much appreciate the effort, and I think it's cool. But like, I'm following I see a bunch of people on X whose usernames are a link to their username is their Mastodon instance, and it's like, well, if you're plugging your Mastodon instance, then get the hell off Twitter. Like there's this one clown that's always arguing with me on Twitter, and his bio is F at Elon Musk, and then his username is is Mastodon instance, and it's like, well, then why are you on the platform, you joker? Like this, like you're making no sense. Go post in your little silo over there if you want that. No, you're on X because you want engagement. So then you stay on X. I find it very weird. These people are weird.
Well, that's the thing is, for me, you saw what happened when I didn't agree with what Twitter was doing back in the day.
Yeah, you just stopped using it.
I stopped using it. Facebook, I don't really use it for anything substantial because I don't really agree with everything that they do. With Twitter, back when it was being Twitter, I didn't agree with it, so I disabled my account or deleted it or whatever I did, and I stopped using it until things changed. Like if you're against what they're doing,
but Brian,
move on.
No, Brian, to really stick it to the man, you have to use their platform with your alternative username in the header and tweet 24/7. That's really how you stick it to the man. Speaking of sticking it to the man, Unity was the man last week, and they were getting it stuck to by seemingly everybody in the video game industry. And last week we kind of ended the conversation with this cliffhanger's probably not the right word to use, but we were waiting for something more, and we got
some
a
response,
little bit.
a reasonable,
little context for folks that haven't that maybe missed last week's show. Unity rolled out this weird monetization structure where they were going to start charging everybody, no matter whether you were paying nothing or you were paying
a backdated one too, which is crazy. I mean,
a retroactive payment scheme for a base amount of installs and updates and sales and things like that. Really convoluted. Highly recommend you check out, what would that have been? 452, last week's episode. We went into that in full detail. But we have an open letter to the community, Brian, on the Unity blog. What's going on?
Well, first of all, this is Mark Witten, and he leads the Unity Create. He says, I lead Unity Create, which I guess that's Unity Engine and editor teams.
Gotcha.
So kind of a weird name for those two categories. But this is how he starts it. I want to start with this. I am sorry, period. I mean, that's that whole paragraph. That's how they start this.
I can confirm.
And it says that, we should have spoken with more of you, and we should have incorporated more of your feedback before announcing our new runtime fee policy. Our goal with this policy is to ensure we can continue to support you today and tomorrow and keep deeply investing in our game engine, which is really the goal, right? They need to figure out how money needs to go into the engine because they don't have the Fortnite, money machine that the other engine has.
They do not have a solid enough revenue stream long term to continue. They're good right now. I don't think they're not short on cash right now. But if you're forecasting out years in the future, you have to be able to generate that stuff and forecast it, and they don't have a way to do this, and they made a stupid decision to try and do it. Continue.
And I think part of the issue is going forward, Unreal is working on getting better support for mobile and other platforms. Other engines are coming into this marketplace to where Unity isn't always necessarily the only choice. Because back in the day, you mentioned last week a little bit, Unity was kind of the only choice when it came to certain type of development because it did it and these other engines didn't do it very well or couldn't even really do it at all. So I think now they've got more pressure on them to where if a studio wants to, they want to make a high quality mobile game with really good graphics, you know what? They might use Unreal Engine, or they might use one of the competitors like Godot or something like that. So here he continues. You're what makes Unity great, and we know we need to listen and work hard to earn your trust. We have heard your concerns, and we are making changes in the policy we announced to address them. So our Unity personal plan will remain free, and there will be no runtime fee for games built on Unity Personal. We'll be increasing the cap from $100,000 to $200,000, and we will remove the requirement to use the Made with Unity splash screen, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I'd have to look at what Unreal does. I don't know that there's a requirement for them to put, made with Unreal Engine, or if there's some sort of perk to doing that. But what I would encourage is if you, rather than making it a requirement, if they do it, give them a perk. Give them a little bit better of a deal. It doesn't have to be huge, and companies will throw it on there, right? So I'm not. That's not a big thing that I was ever hung up on. I think that that's something that they're doing. I don't know why they threw that in there. It just seems kind of odd. Maybe because people are mad. No game with less than $1 million in trailing 12-month revenues will be subject to the fee. So that backdated, if you didn't make $1 million or more, then you're not subject to this. Yep. For those creators on Unity Pro and Unity Enterprise, we're also making changes based on your feedback. The runtime fee policy will only apply beginning with the next LTS version of Unity shipping in 2024 and beyond, which is what they should have done. Because if you created a game on an LTS version on a certain license, then that license should stick, for that period of time while you're using that engine on that version. LTS is like a long-term support version. So it's not going to require any major version changes, and a lot of the fixes and changes that are mainly for how it operates, not new features, will be included in this version to keep it stable and safe, but you won't have to undergo major engine changes. And so a lot of times, they'll build it under a certain LTS and then, update those internally, but not try to jump major version changes like you see with Unreal Engine, where going from 4 to 5 is a big deal. Now, that's a major version, but an LTS would be like a 5.1, and then everything under that gets all those patches. So your game that are currently shipped and projects you are currently working on will not be included unless you choose to upgrade them to the new version of Unity. So they're kind of version gating this, right? You won't be able to upgrade to a newer version of Unity engine unless you're willing to accept these policies, which
sure,
I think that's fine. If you don't want to take advantage of the new features, then stick with an old LTS and continue going down that path. But you're not going to be able to take, which totally makes sense, because you got to think they're putting time, money, investing into the engine and the features and these new things that are coming out. And guess what? Save all your AI stuff for the LTS 2024 version, so that none of the people that are wanting to stay under this old license are going to cost you money. Because that's the problem, is they were making everybody take advantage of the AI and having it under every license when most people aren't going to be using it. And, a lot of people were wanting to remain free, but then, they were going to be putting these different things on their accounts. So I think this is a smarter way to do it. So they say, we will make sure that you can stay on the terms applicable for the version of Unity editor you are using, as long as you keep using that version. For games that are subject to the runtime fee, we are giving you a choice of either a 2.5% revenue share or the calculated amount based on the number of new people engaging with your game each month. Both these numbers are self-reported from data you already have available. You will always be billed the lesser amount. So maybe, you have a ton of installs, but you don't make a lot of money. This is going to be to where you can just say, all right, let's go with the 2.5% revenue share. But if you don't have very many installs, but you make a lot of money, I guess then you could go with the number of people engaging. And this maybe would be for people that have those games that have whales. I mean,
Yep.
stupid game that I play, that it's just, there's certain people who put in thousands of dollars into the game. Well, they are not going to want to do a revenue share when there's a couple of people putting in a high amount of money. Well, now that one has a lot of players, but let's say it's a game like that where there's not a ton of players, but the ones that play put in a ton of money. They're going to want to go with the engagement.
Sure.
So it kind of gives you a way to keep that rate as low as possible, and you kind of game the system. They say, we want to continue to build the best engine for creators. We truly love this industry, and you're the reason why. And then they're going to have a fireside chat. That was that day, which was
last week.
I don't have
Thursday,
yeah,
I think.
so this was the 22nd, 3 days ago. So they had a fireside chat where they answered some questions. So that was their response. Self-reported is the thing. I mean, they're relying on their user base to be honest in this, and part of that will be, of course, if someone's not honest and it's obvious, they're reporting way lower than what maybe Steam DB and all these other things are reporting. They could go after them and kind of verify and maybe go to court about it. But it sounds like they're taking the safest bet. And do you think that this is going to make the people that have said, I'm either canceling my project or I'm not going to, release on Unity Engine now, or release my next version of it on the Unity Engine? Do you think this is going to turn those people to give it a chance? Take back those words?
So a lot of those words are empty veiled threats. I mean, if you are fully if you're fully invested in the Unity ecosystem, I find it very hard to believe that you were leaving Unity, even under their prior fee, even under that ridiculous fee structure we looked at last week. I think this seems to be a good compromise, and I'm glad they said early on in this, and a lot of folks see this idea, Brian. We want to ensure that we can continue to support you today and tomorrow, and keep deeply investing in our game engine. That I would hope, and I don't have any faith, but I would hope that folks in the game community would be able to relate with that, as many of these folks are trying to figure out, okay, we've made our one indie game, we made a couple $100,000, things are going pretty good, we want to invest this back into our studio and build something else. I hope they could wrap their head around this, but unfortunately, Brian, we know all too much about this development community. We kind of know where they fall, and I hate to do this, but I will. Well, I really don't hate to do this, but we know where they fall on kind of their social spectrum. We know kind of the ideology that they subscribe to, and a statement like that, I think, goes over a lot of their heads. Oh, this is greedy America, boo capitalism, and all this other nonsense that you constantly hear. Meanwhile, they are making games and selling them for profits, which is the quintessential definition of capitalism. Nevertheless, don't want to get too bogged down with facts and realities for some people. But this is exactly, I think this is kind of exactly what we talked about last week. You've got a company that offered a free service. Free services are great, but free services don't last forever. There has to be a way to generate revenue, and this seems to be a pretty realistic way to do that. If you're a large studio, like if I'm the Rust folks and I'm looking at Rust 2, maybe they're in a different place where they could maybe leverage some of their creativity and go to Unity and say, hey, we want a couple of your developers to come over here for a period of time. We're going to sub them out, and we want them to help us make the new version of Rust. Something like that might be a little bit different, but if you're just a mid-tier indie studio, I don't think you can afford to leave Unity. And that's a bad place to be, maybe. But at the same time, I mentioned this last week, I'm not victim blaming, but Brian, this is the reality. If you're trying to build a company that you truly don't have control over all of the, call it the means of production, for lack of a better phrase, this is part of what you have to plan and prepare for. You've got certain people that don't do this. Chronicles of Illyria, our favorite game. This guy built the entire damn thing from scratch. Built the whole thing in C+ or C#. There is no base engine. He's not using Unity or Unreal. It's all custom made. He's not withholding. Now, he's never going to make a game, so that's a problem within itself. But you're not beholden to anybody when you do that. And I mentioned this last week as well. Anybody that says, all right, I'm putting my foot down, done with Unity, over to Unreal, 10 years from now, you're probably going to be in the same or similar situation. All of these companies that provide these free services will eventually hit a point in time where they can no longer afford to offer those same services at that same price. That is just the reality of it. I mean, we've seen it with dozens of online services over the hundreds of online services over the last 20 years. Go from the early 2000s, everything that was free and free, of course. We're not, there's no way to monetize this. Now you look at what goes on, and it's all monetization, and that's not a bad thing. We have seen what a successful revenue stream can do for a game, for a engine maker like Unreal. And we saw what the influx of Fortnite did for them. It has allowed them to take their engine to the next stratosphere. I mean, had Fortnite not come along, I will bet every dollar I have, Brian, that Unreal would not have the features it does now. It afforded them the opportunity to pretty much burn money at their Cary facility if they wanted to. It really doesn't matter. They're so flushed with cash, and that has allowed them to really move to the next level. But not things don't last forever, and this is what you have to factor in if you're a developer. I mean, it's just the reality.
Well, and one thing that this did affect, so there's an open source license or engine that's on the MIT license.
Yep.
That's Godot. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. The funding for that did jump quite a bit during this whole debacle. People, they're up to 51,126 euros per month that they receive in support of that engine, which is still, I think it's going to possibly pull away maybe some of the smaller, simpler games that people were doing on Unity that didn't require any super high-end ray tracing and crazy physics and things like that. So I think that's going to eat away a little bit at some of those Unity install base. And then, of course, I mean, you mentioned Rust too. Rust is the perfect candidate for moving to Unreal Engine, because if you look at the things that Rust and that studio put into that game to be able to make it look and act how it does, a lot of those are standard features of Unreal Engine that they forced Unity to be able to do. I mean, if Unity was smart, they would partner with the Rust studio and work with them to try to start implementing the features. This is what Unreal Engine and Epic do. Start partnering with that, one of the major products that are on their engine, and say, all right, what do you need built into our engine that we can build in, that we'll put someone, as you said, on staff there to put these things into the engine to make it so that you don't have to code them into your actual game. They're built into the engine, because the Rust developers are doing it anyways. They're doing all the work. Why not have them work together with some people from Unity and work on having them push it into the main engine so that other people can take advantage? Because all the open world stuff that we're getting from the Witcher series, that's all getting implemented into, and of course they do it with Fortnite as well. But all those things that Epic is building into the Unreal Engine base, they're working with that company, and they're saying, what do we need to do to change the engine to make it work with your product and the way you need it to work? It's going to make the game do really well. It's going to make the game not have any weird glitches and hacks and trying to make things work. And it's going to make your engine even better. And Unity, I haven't heard about them doing this yet, but they're going to need to, because I think that for them to keep up with the need of these developers, and I think that's where a lot of their worry comes in, is how do they get all this AI stuff built in? How did they get all these fancy features that are being rolled out with a super high resolution and automatic LODs and everything that the Unreal Engine now does with crazy performance? How are they going to do that in Unity and still be able to put out AAA games?
Yep.
Well, that's why they need money, because you can't do that on a small budget. And that's why this Godot engine's not going to do it, because even at what, 51 euros a month or 51,000 euros a month or whatever it was, that's
It's
not
nothing.
enough.
It's nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing. I mean, that's what the Epic spends at least per day on, certain things.
Yeah, I mean, not even that, but just to the like, for example, under this change, under the old Unity terms that they released a couple weeks ago, just for context, Rust would have had to pay Unity somewhere in the ballpark of 200 to 250,000 K a month in licensing fees. That goes to show you the kind of differential, the difference in money that we're talking about.
And this would encourage them to move to Rust 2, right? They can have a version that they're capped out at on Rust 1. They can keep the performance, but they're not going to be, consider Rust final, because then all those installs aren't subject to all these install fees. They're not going to have to pay all this extra money. They can kind of not really shut it down, but put it into its released capacity. It's released and done. And then come out with Rust 2. And if you want to do it under this new engine, you can license it and expect those costs going into it. Or you can go somewhere else if you like their licensing more. But this, this would be a good reason for them to stop continually chasing the new versions of the Unity engine in Rust if they don't want to get subject to the future fees, because they just don't need to go to the 2024 version, and they're good.
Exactly. I haven't seen any new Gary Newman, that's the Rust and Gary's mod guy, has not put any new posts out since September 15th. So he hasn't commented on it, but I think you read it on the last show. His last post in a blog titled "Unity Can Get Fucked." Let's not make the same mistake again. Rust 2 definitely won't be a Unity game. So again, emotions are running hot. You're talking about a business having to fork out $250,000 a month in terms of licensing fees. Tensions running a little high. Now, I will say this: I've followed Gary on Twitter for years, and he's a pretty interesting guy to kind of follow. He tends to have pretty strong convictions from everything that I've gathered, so I wouldn't be surprised if he stands by his word on that. And again, Face Punch, which is the group behind Rust, they've got the resources both from a financial and from a development standpoint to make something like that happen. They might be able to do that. But a vast majority, I don't think so, and that's okay. I think their redo here, their attempt to fix this, I think is good. I will say this: I'm very glad, because I mentioned even last week, the fear was they come out and say, nope, we're not doing anything, we're not touching it, everybody please love us. Everybody comes back, and then I mentioned 3 to 5 years from now they do the same thing. I'm glad they stuck by installing some kind of fee structure, because that really to me, that really proves, Brian, that this was not just some lame ass attempt at a revenue grab or a way to kind of put some cash in the bank for the shareholders. They are genuinely trying to figure out how to fund their project long term. And I believed that last week. I believe that this week. And I think their blog post here proves that to be the case, that they're not walking the whole thing back. There is still, for some companies, there is still going to be a significant amount of fee structures that have to be paid. And that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I don't think that's unrealistic. I don't think that's unfair. Now you know what you're going to go get into if you want to release a game or update your game to the next LTS version of Unity that will be out sometime in 2024. So, for some, great. They'll probably go back to Unity. I think that's fine. I think Unity's still a great engine. And for others, they might look at Unreal. They might look at this Godot, which has been around for quite some time. And a rising tide, Brian, raises all ships. And in this case, it's not the best of situations, but I'm sure that influx is going to push Godot. It's going to push Unity, it's going to push Unreal, it's going to push everybody in the in the marketplace to make all of their things and what they're offering a little bit better. And I'm okay with that.
Yep. And hopefully, as you said, everything in the end becomes better, because if you like Unity, then you would be willing to support them being able to make a revenue that continues allowing it to exist, because that's what this really, I think, comes down to for them.
Yeah, they just did a really miserable job at trying
releasing it, announcing
yes.
it. Yes.
Yep, which is not uncommon for companies.
Yeah. So do you mind if we talk a little bit? There's a prediction that I made, or something I said that was going to happen here within the last year. And this is something that has been building. Well, that's a horrible pun. We'll go China's Evergrande. You ever heard about this? You remember when I mentioned Evergrande?
Yes.
They're filing for bankruptcy. I just remember talking about all that mass empty real estate that they do in China. They build just tons of skyscrapers that have nothing in them as an investment. It's one of the only ways in communist China that you can do investments, because of their beliefs with the government and everything. Well, this is something that I said, if this happens, this is going to cause some major problems in China. And I said that it's happening, but they are filing for bankruptcy. This is the place where they just make these skyscrapers, just miles and miles of skyscrapers, because the Chinese government, if they need to use their land, they have to reimburse you based on the buildings that are on there and the occupancy of them. And so they build these buildings that don't have any people in them, and they're not safe enough to live in, because they're made with such cheap materials that they're falling apart within a year of being built.
Literally collapsing.
But when the collapsing, yes. And so when the government comes in and says, well, we need this land to expand whatever, they say, well, I've got skyscrapers on this building that can house 100,000 people. So you need to reimburse me for these buildings of 100,000 people, and that's their way of doing investment. They build them as cheaply as possible, so when the government comes in, they'll then pay them based on what those buildings could be. Well, they've been doing this to where they've hit a point where there's enough buildings that every single person in China wouldn't be able to fill them all now. The number of apartments they have in there, even if every single one of everybody who lives in China went to live in them, they wouldn't be able to occupy them all. That's how bad this has gotten. And China has a gigantic population. So this has been something that's been unfolding for quite some time. I don't remember exactly when I brought it up, but it's within the last year, if I remember correctly.
And some folks might be asking, well, why is this relevant? Well, I found this on this wasn't planned at all. I came across this chart on Twitter this morning. Here's biggest game companies by revenue in 2021. And you'll see the highest number on there by a wide margin, I'll note, is Tencent, which is almost not exclusively, but the largest game developer in the world, largest in terms of revenue, and is a Chinese, for all intents and purposes, a Chinese owned and operated company. And even looking down here at NetEase, which is another Chinese owned and operated company, is making more money than Activision, Blizzard, EA, and Valve. The only big guys in the middle are Sony, Google, Microsoft, Apple, and Nintendo. With a Chinese economic collapse, which is seeming ever more likely now, this has a major impact on the video game industry. I mean, you're talking about...
It takes out two of those on the list, NetEase and Tencent.
$43 billion worth of revenue. Now, obviously, it won't shrink to zero, but you're talking about a major financial hit for the video game industry as a whole if this economy comes, no pun intended, crumbling down, which seems, again, likely now more than ever.
Well, and here, there's a comment on this article talking about this, and so I want to read it. The first comment from a month ago: hiring 10,000 men to dig holes and another 10,000 men to fill the holes up is economic activity, but it does not provide an economic productivity. Building millions of family units in ghost cities that no one will ever live in creates jobs, yes. It creates economic activity. It creates jobs, yes, economic productivity. It's all a mirage. China's
Yes.
prosperity is an illusion that the Wizard of Oz knows well. The ugly curtain is being lifted. China's aging population is screwed. China needs a war to rebalance its social order and kill off its excess males. If it doesn't happen in the next few years, it will be too late. Which that should make everybody scared, because that's the reality. What's everything building to here lately? It's building towards a war. It seems like that's what everybody's pushing to, and I think China really wants a war because
China, yeah, they invade Taiwan and they watch the fireworks fly,
and that will help their economic crash. Because otherwise, they're looking at it as either millions of people could possibly starve from starvation, or millions of people could possibly die in a war. Which one looks better for them? Fighting against the imperialists?
Obviously.
Yes. Poor management and proving that communism doesn't work?
Again.
Not the better option for them. They'd rather send them to war. Of course, the best option would be to change the way that you do business. Actually, go with more of a system that productivity is to help everyone around you and not just all a big fake system like it is. So this is something that I saw, and it kind of makes me worry. Because China is a huge part of the economy in video games, in building, in technology. I mean, you name it. When this thing crashes, it is going to affect the whole world in a major way. And so, I bring it up because I want people to be aware. I want you to be awake because this is something that could possibly affect you at home. It's not going to be just a problem over in China. It's going to be a problem here. We've seen little effects of it. You could get real into conspiracy theories that say COVID was, part of this whole plan, but there's things happening here that are going to be worse than COVID as far as the impact that it has on, for how long it affected hardware manufacturing, which has affected video game sales, which has affected, our just general pocketbook, the cost of food, everything, the cost of fuel. All those things have created kind of a catastrophe here. But you know what? This is going to do something similar, and we're already in a catastrophe here. Imagine if you then add another disaster on top of it. How much worse can it get here? I'm telling you, it can get worse. And that's a sad thing. I don't want to be Chicken Little here, but I really don't think I am. I think this is a very real threat. It's a very real thing coming to us. And China is proving once again communism does not work. And they're going to say, well, that's their capitalism inside of communism. No, it's still communism. When you have people that you're hiring for the sake of hiring, just like, with, having people even with the whole Green New Deal and making all of these green products that aren't as efficient as the old products. And then you have problems to where they're not able to generate the electricity needed. And then you have brownouts. All of this is kind of a similar concept. When you go with a choice based on a belief system rather than what's going to help you survive and be successful, you got problems. And this is the perfect example of all of that.
Yeah, couldn't agree anymore.
So I've got some other China topics here. One thing that I find interesting is there was a report that 47% of Chinese population play games, which is really big. If you look at the United States population, I doubt it's really anything close to that. I'd have to look. U.S. population that plays games. But with our economy, not everybody plays games here. Does it say, well, Americans play 65%, around 2/3 of the population of the country? That's probably mobile. So actually, they're not that far from, but you would think over there where the technology is very limited, there would be a lot less than that. Because most of their population does not have access to a lot of technology, but they do have access to mobile. So they're at about 50%. What does it say? There's a guess, of course, this is AI telling me this answer, that about 66% of American population play video games regularly.
Well, and that's the question is, what do you consider a video game? My grandparents play games on their phones and tablets. That would be considered.
But are they gamers?
Well, no, that's the problem with a number like that is, yes, the 66% does sound correct. Everybody, Brian, if you have a smartphone, which vast majorities of the population do. You have a game installed on that phone, at least one that you probably play time and time, or time, a little bit of time here and there. When you look at China, you're talking about a massive population. You're talking about over 1 billion people versus about 300 million, so 350 million in the U.S. So you're talking about a huge population. And a lot of this number, a lot of this percentage sways young. And this is a much younger population, which has been a big issue for China to deal with, as they are trying to figure out how in the hell they continue their economy with a group of individuals based on their own failure of their economic system. How do they keep a population working?
Well, in Tencent's had their fastest profit rise since late 2021, which I think is, kind of that 2021 was probably late in COVID when all that started to taper off, when they started realizing that not everybody was going to be home forever, locked in their houses playing video games. But I think that they're starting to recover. They unlocked that whole video game market there, allowing them to sell video games. China, of course, approved 31 new video games, like Avatar, Lord of the Rings, pushing their 2023 total past, to be higher than the previous years. And that we're 3/4 of the way through the year, or 2/3 of the way through the year, and they've already surpassed the number that they approved last year. So, I think they're hoping, when one economy is crumbling, their whole real estate thing, I think they're hoping that their tech industry is going to keep this alive, that they're going to be able to keep money flowing and going through video game marketing. But I don't know that they can, because it's not really an investment, unless they start letting people invest more into Tencent inside the country or do something like that. Their real estate was their only method of someone supposedly investing. The rest is all controlled by the government. So I don't know what they'll be able to do, but Tencent didn't meet what they call their expectations. Their revenue was 149.21 billion Chinese yuan, which is 20.46 billion US dollars. They representing a rise of 11% year over year. So that's pretty big. Profit attributable to equity holders at the company was a 41% year on year rise. So I mean that's pretty good. They're making more money. So whether it keeps their industry going, the tech industry, because didn't they split all these up into separate little subgroups inside of Tencent? From what I remember, they created all these categories in there. I thought, or was that was that NetEase? I'm trying to remember how that worked.
Yeah, it was one of those companies. You're right. I don't remember that either. It's definitely interesting to try and follow, though.
Yeah, and one thing interesting. Remember, they were trying to limit kids' access to they put all those gaming restrictions on. They finally realized that Chinese gaming restrictions are an ineffective policy that hasn't cut playtime. So they've accepted that. Yeah, they must have ways to kind of get around things, because they were using the facial recognition and everything else. They were limited to 1 hour of daily playtime between 8 and 9 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, and public holidays. So they had a set hour that they were supposed to play every day, and they could only play during that 1 hour.
Now, this is likely my ignorance speaking, and I'm big enough where I can admit that. If I were a child in China, and again, what they think of the government versus what we think of the Chinese government is very different. I don't know that I would screw around with the Chinese government all that much. If they told me I could only play a video game for an hour a day, that's probably what I would do. Obviously, they weren't. China's got some incredibly strict rules, and obviously this was one that they were not enforcing very strict. They weren't coming and taking your child away and throwing them,
kicking your door in,
which is by the way par for the course for China. That is something that they will absolutely do. So in terms of the fact that it was seemingly a little bit of a lax policy, for lack of a better term, then that makes sense to me. I mean, if they weren't seriously enforcing it, then yeah, it had probably no impact at all.
Well, and that's the thing is they were using the Unity statistics. They, so
Mhm.
Unity has some sort of statistics, and that's how they were figuring out.
Oh, what do you mean? Well, there's this big conversation last week. How would Unity have all these numbers, Brian? Of course there's telemetry in these games.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yep. And so they were using those and able to figure out that there's a lot more playing than what they're supposedly being allowed to do.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. I bet you I bet you they're releasing some of this information or not really locking down on it as much because they want to have that boost the economy. Chinese secretly do like capitalism as long as it's helping the government.
Sure.
They only don't like they don't like capitalism when it helps the person, the people on the street, the citizens. They want it to help the government to be more successful and bigger.
Yes. Speaking of government, let's talk briefly about what's going on. It's been a couple of weeks since we've discussed Microsoft, Activision Blizzard, and the United Kingdom. Here's some good news for Activision Blizzard and Microsoft lovers. The UK, their CMA, has preliminarily approved Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard. The CMA says its modified deal addresses the main issues in cloud gaming, which I still don't know what exactly they were trying to say, but quote, residual concerns remain. So they say that they've preliminarily approved it, and now they are expected to have a decision out by late next week. By October the 6th is the deadline that they've got. So part of this was that Microsoft...
Their quote.
Sure.
Sorry, here's their quote about those, because I was trying to figure out what are those limited residual concerns.
Yeah.
However, the CMA stopped short of fully approving the deal as it has limited residual concerns that certain conditions of this sale of cloud gaming rights to Ubisoft could be circumvented, terminated, or not enforced. That's why they didn't give it, because remember they said Ubisoft would be able to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, because it can be circumvented, terminated, or not enforced, that's why they won't give it the full blessing.
Well, they haven't given the full blessing yet. They will approve it in the next
Well, that's why
week.
they haven't, at this point, given it the full blessing and said that we 100% are behind us.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like even once they approve it, they're still going to say, well, there's still, we told you so, we told you so. And that's exactly as you noted. For 15 years, all current Activision Blizzard titles plus any released in the next 15 years will have their cloud gaming rights. Ubisoft will have access to distribute on their platforms, their Uplay platform. Here's the reality. If I'm Microsoft, I know damn well that Ubisoft's cloud gaming platform is not going to exist in 15 years, and we'll probably buy it. So, we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. But
that's what. Yeah, all you do is buy Ubisoft next.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
thanks, UK. You did great.
Yeah. So that seems like a done deal. Just final approval in the next week and a half or so. And that will put us on track for an end-of-the-year final acquisition merger between Activision Blizzard and Microsoft.
It'll be an interesting thing to see. One thing that came out of all of these back and forth with court documents and everything is supposedly, and this is according to The Verge, Microsoft leaked its own Xbox documents.
You know, man, I was watching some of this stuff last week. So there's this huge document dump of an Xbox Series X design that was diskless. This was the hot topic in all of the various news sites. Thing looked bizarre. I mean, it looked like a wireless router.
It's like a tube.
Yeah, I mean, it literally looks like what you would get from a fiber ISP. This is the Xbox Series X refresh. Deliver 4K 9th generation console gaming with more internal storage, faster Wi-Fi, and reduced power. 2 gigabytes of internal storage, USB-C front port with power delivery, so realistically use this thing to charge your laptop. $499 for the price, 15% power reduction in terms of its PSU, lower standby mode, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, refresh of the Xbox, which looks phenomenal, by the way. It looks like every other
the shape
home
makes
appliance
sense.
you see. Yeah.
When you got to think the shape makes sense, because what's the thing that really is going to matter? And there's the fan. And so that's what, all the shape around it when you're building things, because, I mean, you got to have a fan that spins in a circle. All the other things around it's kind of wasted space that doesn't go towards the fan. So you've got pretty much the shape of a fan so that it can blow air through this to keep it cool. And that's probably about as small as they could get it with getting everything inside of it. And so I like it more than the Cube, personally.
Yeah. Well, this is the Apple trash can approach, the Apple Mac Pro with a similar design, and that thing had phenomenal airflow.
Yep.
So this was the big controversy all week, and now you're telling me right here, right now, that Microsoft leaked all of this themselves?
Well, that's what they're supposedly saying, because in the filing, Judge Jacqueline Scott Corley says that the court ordered the Federal Trade Commission and Microsoft to provide the court with a secure cloud link to trial exhibits with redactions that met the court's recent orders. Microsoft provided a link on September 14th, and the court uploaded the exhibit from there. So supposedly, I assume that's where it came from. The FTC and Microsoft must resubmit it. Let's see, I'm trying to find where they say that got leaked out.
The FTC blamed it on Microsoft. That's what.
But it says the version of the exhibits provided contained non-public information, which might be the understatement of the century, and the court has to remove them. So the problem is they put things, they didn't redact enough. All right, I think that's what they're claiming when they put this link up there. It was a clear cloud link, but then these are court documents that they were supposed to put things in with redactions. It sounds like they didn't put redactions on all the content.
Yeah, and of course the FTC is blaming Microsoft, and we know the current Federal Trade Commission in the way that they operate. I don't believe a damn word that they say. Nevertheless, not that I really care where the leak came from. Phil Spencer released a full memo about this, saying that these were unintentionally disclosed, so on and so forth. Yeah. Outside of that diskless console we just looked at, there were some other documents that hinted at a 2028 Xbox that would deliver cloud hybrid games, unannounced Bethesda game, and even discussions about acquiring Nintendo. Holy smokes. None of this stuff is shocking, though. I mean, a 2028 Xbox is on par with what we see from the traditional console cycle, and by 2028, I don't foresee a console coming with a disk drive. Now, what I can see is a situation where Microsoft sells an external enclosure. They used to do this for the Xbox 360. You could get an external Blu-ray plug-in that would connect to the device. It looked like an external hard drive for folks that still want to maybe do backwards compatibility. You can buy this little dongle, plugs in via USB-C, bada bing, right in the front, power delivery and data over one port. But I don't foresee any new consoles being released with traditional discs at this point. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And these documents, they were all in a 5-page PDF that got uploaded into that file dump. So this is almost as bad. They mentioned in here that PlayStation where they had redactions that they had done with the Sharpie, and of course people on the internet were able to use programs to be able to see exactly what was underneath of the Sharpie, because there were still indentations and enough lines there to really see what they were saying. So this is something that, whether they did it on purpose or not, who knows? I don't think it's really going to hurt anybody.
Did it on purpose. That doesn't make any sense to me. Did they do it out of stupidity? Maybe. Purpose?
Yeah, oversight, or maybe not realizing that those were going to become public. But that's the thing, is they got to realize that all the things uploaded to there are going to be filed and be publicly accessible at some point. So don't put things on there that you don't want to have be a part of the public record. That's what they call it, the public record. So, that's one thing. Is you talked about them wanting to acquire Nintendo. Now, really, what he said is Nintendo acquiring Nintendo would be a good move for both companies.
Sure.
I personally think that is kind of true. If you look at the state of Nintendo just kind of seems to somehow hang on. And I think the only thing that's really keeping them alive at the moment was their Switch product.
Well, now hold on a second. I want to disagree with you. Let me pull my graphic back up. I mean, you say they're just barely holding on. They're making more money. I mean, they're making more money than Activision Blizzard. I mean, they're making more money than EA and Valve. You're looking at a company that made $15 billion in revenue that's on par with Apple and $1 billion less than Microsoft, Brian.
Because of the Nintendo Switch. If they didn't have the Nintendo Switch, that would not be on the list.
Well, sure, but I mean,
what other product do they have?
But you could make the same argument about Microsoft. If you take away the Xbox, I mean, they're not generating $16 billion in revenue. There's this constant
They make a lot from Azure. They make a lot from their Office products.
This is game
Office
company
365.
But this is game.
Well, okay, yeah, but
this is game.
But what outside of that does Nintendo really have anymore? That's what I'm saying is they're kind of a one-trick pony at the moment. If they would have gotten lucky, which I feel they really got lucky with the Nintendo Switch. It just took. It's not a great device when it comes to. I have two of them.
I don't, man. But there's not many times I vehemently disagree with you, but I'm going to vehemently disagree with you, Brian. Nintendo has not been lucky with what they've done. The Nintendo Wii was a phenomenal console when it came out,
but way behind on hardware. To where people, I have one.
So do I. Way behind on hardware, but also way ahead of its time in the things that it did. This is before the Kinect, before the PlayStation Eye. It brought forward a different generation of gaming. The Game Boy, the Nintendo DS.
Now that's when they were on their game. That's what I think. I think with the what was their other little device? My boys have a couple
DS,
of them.
The 3DS,
the DS, the 3DS, and the Nintendo DS.
Things are cool.
Like
as hell.
those were done well. Yeah, the Game Boy was done well, previous consoles, but I think ever since the Wii, they just haven't been the same. And then they came out with a Switch, which was totally opposite of anything they've ever done before, as far as how they did it. Because it didn't just take Nintendo games, they made it to where it was backwards compatible with everything, and I think that's what saved it. Because everything in Unreal Engine could work on it. And it gave them a huge amount of games that they didn't have access to, which brought it up in as far as what people saw it as. Because if they wouldn't have opened that gate, because they didn't do that till after it was released.
Sure.
They did some things to adjust it and make it work. But if you look at what they originally released it as, I don't think it would have been that successful with the limited number of games that they put on there at first. It's only because they made it to where it worked with a bunch of non-Nintendo games that it became super successful, and a lot of people have one now. But I think they got really lucky with the timing of it because it was new enough and different enough. People bought a bunch of them, and now competitors come out, and people aren't buying the competitors. They're still getting Switches.
But let me use your own words to make my point. Mm-hmm. You mentioned how the Game Boy was a phenomenal console, and the DS was a phenomenal console, and the Wii was a phenomenal console. People have trust in Nintendo. The Nintendo Wii, a disaster. But the
Wii U even wasn't.
Excuse me, not the Nintendo Wii. The Nintendo Wii was the best-selling video game console of all time. The Wii U was a disaster. Yeah. That was
their modern attempt at it.
Well, yeah, but their modern attempt, they were pretty on the money because what the Wii U was with that stupid little TV
was the little console, was the little controller,
is what the Switch ended up becoming. And this is a company that has been in the handheld game market since the 90s. So there's a couple of things there. First, you've got people that have faith in the company, and rightfully so, because they have a track record of making very good devices. I mean, from the original Game Boy to the Game Boy Color, the original Nintendo DS in 2008, that thing was freaking sick when it came out. It was nothing like anything else. Then they got into weird stuff with the 3DS and the 3DI, and then that one stupid 2DS or whatever it was called. Some stupid stuff in the middle. But generally, this has been a very consistent company, Brian, and they have one thing. I will pull this list back up. They have one thing that none of these other companies on this list have, from Valve to Tencent, and that is IPs galore. Nintendo has got so many billion-dollar IPs that have never been released on other platforms and will never be released on any platforms. And so when you look at this company as a whole, yes, they're going to have to adapt. And it's amazing that the Switch is still selling the way that it is because you're right. It's not a brand new device. But here's the reality, Brian. people, and I think this is a prime example of people want the games. They will. Yeah. The same thing with the Wii. You are absolutely correct. The hardware when that came out, 2007, was garbage in comparison to what the Xbox and PlayStation had. But guess what? The Xbox didn't have bowling. The Xbox didn't have tennis that you could wave around the wand and throw through your plasma screen TV and have your father murder you. It didn't have
$2,000 machine TV.
$2,000 television back in 2006. It didn't have the fitness board that you could stand on and do yoga. It didn't have Mario Kart with the cute little plastic thing that you could drive around. It didn't have any of that stuff, right? So that is what Nintendo's bread and butter has always been. I have stated for years on old shows, not even this show, back to way back to when I was doing shows back in like 2011. Nintendo is not in competition with Microsoft and Sony. They do their own thing, and this chart proves they're doing it just as well as Microsoft and Google and Apple.
Yep.
They're doing it just as well.
But I think where they really lucked out was the timing of the Switch. Because I think if someone else would have come out with something that performed well at the time, they could have, because there wasn't anything really doing that yet. And, regardless of whether I think companies could come out with much better systems now for a reasonable price, but I don't think they can pull people away now from the Switch because the Switch has such a large game base, first of all, now, and it has access to all of these games, like, all the Zelda games that you can't get anywhere else, Mario games. I just think I just wish that they would be more up to date on their hardware, but when's the Switch 2 coming out?
But let me, but I want to dive into this. I'm going to be, have you seen The Sopranos?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to be your shrink for a minute. So you're going to sit down in the chair.
Okay.
We're going to talk about this problem. You're talking about the hardware, and I don't disagree with you. Yet you own 2 Switches and you've played it. So it's obviously not affecting you.
But I barely play them. That's the thing.
But that's not the reason you don't play them. If they had higher enough hardware, you would play them.
I don't like the interface, and I don't like how the system works. You can't put child controls, or else we'd hand them to our kids and say, have fun.
Sure.
You cannot put parental controls on it that have any lasting effect. So for me, it's not so much about me playing the Switch. I'd like to give the device to my kids and say, here, you have access for this many hours a day or for this amount of time to be able to play these games that I've allowed you to.
Why don't you relax over there, freaking commie?
But the thing is, it won't let me do that. It's going to let them play every single game that I own and not put any time limit. And if I do put a time limit on it, if I pick it up and log in under my account, guess what? I get the same time limit.
Rules
so it's like they made it,
but not for me.
Yeah. It's like, so if they don't get a time limit, or if I have to have a time limit, guess what? You're not getting it at all. That's what this has come down to.
Yeah,
but I really should just put a time limit and I hand it to them. But it's just so silly. They've made it so unfriendly with the user interface and the software they have on there. That's what drives me nuts.
My point is this. Even though it's not up to snuff hardware-wise, and these other companies could make competing devices, they could, but they won't and they can't. Well, they can. They won't do it, and they won't be successfully doing it because there is one thing that you missed out of this equation. Nintendo has got a unique position where they have owned the handheld market since the when did the original Game Boy come out? The early 90s?
That was the early 90s, like at least
early
90s. Something like 93.
They've owned the handheld video game market, Brian, for 30 years. Nobody else.
It says 1989 was when the first one came out. That was in Japan, though.
Okay.
In Europe, it came out. In North America, it came out in 1990.
So there you go. So for nearly 35 years, Nintendo has been the only serious handheld game company until the iPhone came out. Nobody else had ever played a game on a remote thing. I mean, yes, some people had PSPs and there were some other attempts, but nobody owned it like Nintendo did. They are uniquely qualified.
What you're saying? My save cartridge on my game?
On your Dreamcast, your little EMU.
My Dreamcast. That wasn't my mobile game.
No, you play with a little Tamagotchi on your memory card. No, that doesn't count, Brian.
Okay, doesn't count. All right, just
it does not count. So they are uniquely qualified in that, and I'll put this chart in the show notes because I really think it opens the door. And I feel the same way. You look at Nintendo, you think, yeah, it's just a company that's hanging on. Numbers don't indicate that at all. And then guess what,
Well,
Brian?
for me, it was more of
as much as you say you want new hardware and you want the latest and greatest, while many other people do, guess what? They're still buying these consoles hand over fist. Yeah. They're buying every new $70 title that comes out because it's the only freaking place that you can buy it. And that is where Nintendo is owning this market.
And by what I mean by hanging on is I feel like, in the movies when there's that guy who, he's on the cliff and he's got the ice pick things. And it's like he leaps off the cliff and he just barely hits it and like he's made it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's how they are with some of their releases. It's like they don't make money for years. And then all of a sudden they come out with something and it sells a ton. Mm-hmm. And then they'll go eventually. Now with the Switch has been different for them, I feel like. Like they've held on to this for quite some time. Where the Wii U didn't have a very long survivability rate, as far as people keeping them in their houses.
They have sold...
had a fairly short kind of a flash pan thing as well.
They sold 101 million Wiis. It's the highest selling video game console of all time. And the Nintendo Switch, this is a Polygon article from 2021. It was at 84.59 million units worldwide. That number's well over 85 million now. May even be higher, maybe in close to 90. They have continued to sell these things. The community continues to want them. You go into any Target, Walmart, any big box store where they sell these things, there's a Nintendo display, and the stuff is always sold out. People are constantly buying it. I
just wish they would fix the parental controls. Like if
yes, sure.
For what they sell, like it just doesn't make sense. Microsoft makes good ones. Android makes good ones. I can put all the restrictions, limitations, everything that I want. But the second that I go to Nintendo, it's like, oh, you want to put a second user on there that has, a different time limit? Nope, sorry, can't do that. Like it makes zero sense. Like I want to be able to have it for each kid. They can have a code that they log into. You can jump between every user without putting any kind of a pin in. Like, what's my admin? Why me having an admin account? How's that an admin account when they can switch to my account and change anything they want? It's weird. But that's my main concern. It's like I just feel like they would be more successful as a thing you could hand your kid and say, oh, I can have my games on it, and then I can have their version that they can play. And it's just weird that Nintendo, of all companies, won't do that.
I was not expecting a full-on Nintendo conversation tonight, but guess what, Brian? That's how she goes when you're chatting with your buddy about video games and whatnot. Brian, where can folks find you on the old interwebs?
All right. Well, if you want to find me, you can find me at Voicey Computer on X, or if you can get at Brian Aldridge on Gab, Getter, True Social, wherever those places might still exist. If you want to check out my blog, biteoftech.com. But if you go to our website, infectionpodcast.com, I encourage you to go to the upper right-hand side and join our server on Discord, because there you can contact us directly, or perhaps you want to give some input to the show, put a link in the show news channel. Also, there's our 11 ARC servers that we have running. You can find all the information for those right on that on our Discord. If you want to watch the live show, you can do that through Twitch or YouTube, or watch the recording on Rumble. Or you can listen to a recording after the fact on one of our podcast platforms at the lower right-hand side. There's a lot of different ways that you can listen and find us there. If you are listening, that means we have the show notes uploaded and ready on our website. You can click and use the video and audio player built into those pages, and then follow with links and source material or videos. Everything that we put in there are things that we've discussed during the live show. So perhaps you're listening and you want to get a little more input or dig into the things that we're showing on screen. It's all right there. If you want to support us, there's a support menu option up top, or you can go to infectionpodcast.com/support.
Yes, you can. You can definitely do that. These Monday shows are pretty nice. We might need to have a longer term conversation about these. I'm very, very much enjoying the Monday show. We'll put a note in our Discord what day we'll be on next week as we continue to work through some of our different scheduling things. So, Brian, as always, greatly appreciated, my friend. Nice little conversation. I like that. We'll talk to you next week. You can follow me on X at Nicholas M. Craig. You can check out my daily antics by downloading the Wilmington's Morning News podcast. You find that wherever you get your shows. And, of course, go to our website, infectionpodcast.com. And when you go there, well, you might find that very interesting Nintendo chart that we were continuing to look at throughout the program. You miss any portion of the show notes, all that fun stuff, it's on our website. It's infectionpodcast.com. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.